Greetings, fellow crushers. It's Sean from Version 2 Poker again. Got another hand that I played the other day, and it's another pretty interesting spot. I think even more interesting than the last hand I went over. I guess we can just dive right in. The background of the hand is the villain is a regular who plays pretty aggressive. He's like 30-24 with the 16% 3 bet. Um, and he 3 bets specifically 16% against the cutoff and like 22% versus the button, 22% versus the small blind, 15% versus under the gun. I mean, he's like a 3 bet maniac. And basically, he's a heads up regular that ends up he table starts at 6 max and then it ends up being staying at the 6 max tables when they develop. So I think that he plays a bit too loose and aggressive for 6 max, although I think he's an excellent heads up player. But yeah, so that's kind of his player type. He's just a little bit over aggro. He's probably a slightly losing player at 6 max, but I don't think that's because he's a non-thinking or just like a poor poker player in general. I just think he doesn't quite adjust enough to six-handed play. Anyway, so we open from the cutoff to $6 at 1-2, and he 3 bets to $16, which is obviously a bit on the small side. Um, I versus this regular, if I had been playing on the site more in the last couple months, I could potentially be four betting this for value, but I think that we don't have enough history, recent history, for him to really want to like spaz out and get it in with worse than ace queen, and I don't really remember if he flats four bets or not, especially out of position. So. You know, ace queen versus like a 16% range, and I don't really know how he constructs his range, but it's pretty tough to construct any 16% range that ace queen doesn't do really well against. You know, like if he's three betting ace jack and ace tens and king queens, then I dominate those. And if he's three betting like suited connectors and offs, you know, I don't know, like suited connectors and jack eight suited and king eight suited type hands, I do really well against those too. So there's basically no, like, no matter how he constructs his range, ace queen is doing really well against it. So I'm definitely not folding. And like I said, I didn't really have enough history to want to start four betting him with this hand without knowing how he's going to react to it. So I flat in position with good odds, and he checks the flop really quick on king 7-8 rainbow, which is kind of a strange flop to check. He has a 55% c bet overall, which is pretty low, but I would expect even someone with a 55% c bet to be c betting this board with almost all of their air. So if he three bet a hand like, I don't know, ace five suited, I would almost certainly expect it to be c bet on this flop. If he three bet, I mean, any hand like 9-10 or jack 10 or jack 9, like any of those gut shots, I expect to c bet. If he three bet like pocket twos, I would expect that to c bet. So the only hands that kind of make sense for him to be checking here is maybe a hand like ace 8 suited, ace 8 off, pocket nines, pocket tens, pocket jacks, pocket queens, right? So types of hands that might be pot controlling. Um, and and even, by the way, even these I expect to see bet some decent amount of the time, right? Because like with a hand like ace 8, you don't really want to give away free cards. You much prefer to c-bet and treat it more as a 5-out semi-bluff and just take down the pot. Because if you have ace-8 and you make someone fold queen-jack, that's a pretty good win for you, because if we just look at what ace-8, just I'll just show you guys. Um, just say queen-jack off and queen-jack suited on a king of hearts, 7 of diamonds, 8 of spades board. It's going to have something like 20% equity, 25% equity, which doesn't seem like a lot, right? Like ace 8 is really far ahead of queen jack. But if you start checking with ace 8, queen jack might fire the flop, and then you put yourself in this check call mode, and we don't know if the guy has queen jack or king jack, and it puts us in a really tough spot. Um, and you just give him free equity, when if he's going to fold 25% equity for a half pot bet, that's like a pretty big deal. That's a big win for us. So So he should be c-betting, these kind of mediocre hands as well. His ace eights, his pocket nines, pocket tens. Um, but he has a kind of low c-bet overall, so I don't think it's unreasonable to think that he might check hands like this. Um, he definitely could check hands like this. So anyway, when I have a hand like Ace Queen with a backdoor flush draw, I don't think that he's check folding very often, right? I don't think he's checking his air. I think he's checking a hand that's like pocket controlling, or sorry, I forgot to include this, hands that are like trapping, right? So like Ace is Ace King, pocket kings, maybe even a king queen he might consider like a to check jam here. Pocket eights and pocket sevens if he happens to three bet those. I don't really know if he does, but he has 16% three bet, so it's not unreasonable to think that he might have hands like that. And then a 7-8 suited type hand. So he could be pot controlling with some pair in between the king and the eight, or he could be checking to trap me with some type of monster like King Queen plus. So, and it's very unlikely that he's checking, just total air. So I think that I make the correct play here and check back the flop, and try to, just take my free equity, um, and just kind of play it out on future streets. Usually that's just going to mean him firing the turn on a brick and then me folding, which is fine. But sometimes I turn an ace or a queen or a diamond, uh, and that gives me equity. So anyway, on the turn ace, he fires pretty quickly half pot. Um, and so let's look at his range again. I think that he would almost certainly, like, let's think of one, my range looks a lot like ace highs and pocket jacks as well. So my range looks kind of like his range, except that I don't have my range looks a little bit like his range, except I don't have the nuts, right? Like I'm very unlikely to have these nutted hands, and I will have some hands like I actually do have, like just some ace highs that are kind of giving up or trying to bink, right? Um, and so when he fires this turn, I think he does expect me to have a decent amount of ace X's, but I also think it's somewhat possible he'll just fire with like pocket nines, and just be like, well, I hope he folds now, right? Like maybe hoping I fold pocket jacks or something like that. I don't think it's a particularly good play. I think if he checks the flop with pocket nines, he should probably just check fold this turn because I do have so many ace X's. But I don't think it's impossible that he would be firing those. So I call, thinking that thinking that he might sometimes just stab and hope I fold with these kind of middling hands. Um, and so I call, and then the river is the three of diamonds, so huge brick, and he checks very quickly again. And so the whole point of this hand is, should I be value betting the river? And I think that most people would value bet the river, just be like, oh, he checked. I clearly have the best hand. Maybe he has ace five. Maybe he has ace six. Maybe he has king queen that was trapping the flop and like now is going to check call me. And I think in reality, um, the part of his range that I want to call, right, uh, would be the nines through queens, and that's almost certainly check folding after the way the action goes because I look so much like ace X. Um, and the types of hands that I would like that might call me, the ace fives and the ace sixes, are very unlikely to have checked the flop in his spot. Uh, so like it's just like while they might be there occasionally, they're just really, 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 really heavily discounted. So if I bet the river, I'm getting check folds out of nines through queens, and I'm getting check shoves out of pocket kings, aces, and ace king, and then his potential like pocket sevens, pocket eights. And if I do get just check called, I think it'll more likely be by a hand like 7-8, that doesn't feel comfortable like check jamming on this board anymore because it's worried like I might have ace king or ace 8 or something. So like it, but if I do get like check call, if he does something that's not check folding, I'm almost certainly beat. Um, and actually, and one of the other points of this hand was in game, I end up thinking, man, he should just check shove his entire range here, and then I bet half pot anyway. But I think that in reality, because of what his range looks like, if he happens to get to the river with nines through queens, he should be check shoving these as bluffs, uh, because my range almost never has the nuts, right? Because I would almost certainly not check back the flop with my ace kings. I would almost certainly four bet with pocket kings and pocket aces. If I had pocket sevens or pocket eights, I probably wouldn't check the flop. So I have very few hands that are really nutted that can call a check raise, and his range does have hands that can legitimately value shove and can play this way reasonably, or at least can be perceived to play this way. Um, so I don't actually think most people would ever take this line with nines through queens, but I think that if they ever get to the river in this spot, they absolutely should be check shoving, because really the best hand I'm ever going to have in this spot is ace eight, or excuse me, ace queen. So anyway, I hope you. Oh, okay. And then long story short, I did half pot the river against my instincts in game, and he check shoved, and I hated life, and then I folded. So anyway, I hope this hand was interesting for everyone, and I hope you learned a bit. I tried to make it go a little bit faster than the last video. If I talk too fast, let me know. And as always, post comments or questions in my thread or here on YouTube. Later, guys.